Hello and welcome back to the Brew Hoop podcast. It's that time again, folks. Time to pod all about your favorite team, the Milwaukee Bucks. I'm Adam Paris, co-managing editor of brewhoop.com, joined as usual by Kyle Carr and Riley Feldman. Oh, I forgot I had nicknames for you. I was going to say Kyle Hype Train Conductor Carr and Riley. I forgot yours, Riley. I'm sorry. How are you guys doing?
What an awful start to this podcast. Wow. Okay.
Wow. Okay. So, well, sorry about that, Riley. I'm sure it'll come to me, or it wasn't good enough for the air. But I think the important thing, guys, is that we have to talk about the fact that there's been a lot of changes since our last podcast, and the most important one is that Riley got a dog. How is your dog, Riley?
I was going to say, usually you give us a little bit of a runway to be able to introduce ourselves and say how things are going. Our dog, his name is Ali. He is a 1-year-old Lhasa Apso. He's a real sweetheart, and he just got groomed and shaved yesterday, so he looks nothing like he did when we adopted him, but he's adjusting well to the new home, so it's all good for us.
How is he doing in the cold?
Pretty good. When we first picked him up, I mean, I don't know if people know what Lhasas look like, but they have like the really long, obnoxious coat, like they're show dogs almost. So he does well in the cold generally. Now that he's shaved, we might have to get him a little coat, but otherwise he's coping well.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, as long as we'll share our biggest changes in our personal lives since the last podcast. Let's see what I have. I have my tax documents next to me on my desk, and I haven't done them yet. That's a huge change for me. Kyle, what about you?
We are giving our living room a makeover. So different paint, new furniture that will maybe get here. It was supposed to be here like 3 weeks ago.
How big is the Bucks logo that's going behind the TV?
Working on it. I'm still trying to find room for my Giannis fat head. So I think
the fat head. Shout out fat heads. Wow.
Did you guys have wallpaper in your room as a kid that had like teams logos on it or anything? I had dinosaurs.
I had an NFL one.
My dad, he stenciled out and painted like Indy cars around our room, which was really impressive. But and I think my brother had a Clay Matthews fat head, which is weird because he's a Vikings fan, so I didn't really get that.
Did the IndyCar love stick? Are you still a big fan?
No, I'm not sure why he chose to do it. But that was just we were like 4 or 5, and he just did it, so it was what it was.
He was like, "This is easy enough. I'll do it."
It's like the most obscure thing for him to pick to stencil out, but all credit to him for actually doing it.
Wow. Well, I think you can tell what we're trying to do here. We're basically stalling for time, so we don't have to talk about that horrific Orlando loss last night that the Bucks put up 103-83. They shoot their worst percentage of the year. I think it was 32.9%. Giannis, of course, sits. And I'll take the L on this one, guys. I had put together the podcast outline, and I basically chucked it up as a win, trying to figure out how much the Bucks would beat them by. And this happened a couple months ago when the Bucks lost that double overtime game against the Knicks as well. I did the same darn thing. So feel free to direct your hate at me.
No problem. Did you do the same thing during that Suns loss earlier this season too, by chance?
I wouldn't put it past me. I feel really bad about it. I felt awful having to go in and then change the outline tonight. I want to apologize to Bucks Nation for putting this out on you.
Yeah, let's definitely blame Adam instead of the actual players, because that's an easier target. That's something that I don't have to like sit here and scroll through on Twitter and see. So yes, put all the blame on Adam.
When I was putting together the preview, it just I didn't know that Giannis was going to be out. As per, if you saw it, my article, that was the reason why I didn't know he was going to be out. But as soon as you found that out, you were like, okay, this is going to be odd, but you figure we can dispatch the Magic. And then it's like Nikola's not going to play either. And just from like the tip, I think when I first like pulled up the game, the score was like 12-2 for the Bucks, and then by the time it actually loaded, like got done buffering, the Magic were in the lead. So it was kind of that kind of game going on.
Yeah, it started off so well. Like it was 8-0. Timeout was called. Like, okay, good. This is gonna be an easier game. I like it. And then the Magic kind of clawed their way back, and I was like, all right, it's fine. This is expected. I wasn't gonna expect the Magic to just roll over. And then they just kept hitting shots, and the Bucks couldn't hit a shot, and it just got worse and worse. And I kept telling myself, maybe they'll turn it around after half. Maybe they'll turn it around after the third quarter, and then I just had to give up.
Yeah, it was a really, really tough watch for the Bucks last night. And then, of course, looking at these shooting lines is just crazy. Chris Middleton, 4 for 17. Malcolm Brogdon, 4 for 18. Eric Bledsoe had a decent night, 7 for 13. But then you have DJ Wilson going 2 for 8. I mean, this was tough all the way around. Literally, the only highlight that I had that was kind of nice was just seeing Trayvon Duval get a couple minutes at the end of the game there.
The 8 p.m. start time did not help either. That's salt in the wound right there.
Yeah, that is completely true.
I blame the 8 p.m. start time. That's
exactly.
Blame.
So I think certainly the less said, the better about that. I thought it was kind of interesting. I just was curious about this, so I wanted to look back at like the how the Bucks have done over the past 2 years when Giannis has sat mostly due to rest and that kind of stuff. So they're 7-4 over the past 2 seasons without him. And I was curious how the 2015-16 Cavs did. You know, the team that won the championship, obviously, when they didn't have LeBron. They went. I was just sort of thinking similarly in terms of how they had a lot of players that fit around LeBron and how he was basically the fulcrum point of their offense. And of course, they also had Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love. Kyrie Irving, a superior player to anyone else on the Bucks roster, but they went 1-5 that year without LeBron. 2 of those games were without Kyrie, but one was without Love at the end of the season. And then the only win they had was a 1-point victory over Dallas. So, I mean, these things happen when your team is completely built around fit for one player, and it's disheartening, you know, when they're not able to pull it out. But this is definitely going to be an outlier shooting performance as we look back on it throughout the year.
Yeah, I would agree that the thing that I took away most, and shocker, if you have, you know, your MVP candidate is gone, then the rest of the team might do nearly as well. So I'm not even like whiplashing like, okay, the rest of these guys are awful without Giannis. I mean, the whole thing is built around him. And I think there was an article last week from 538 that was talking about how the Bucks have shifted their offense and how Giannis had his points off assists that were threes. So teammates who took threes and made them off of one of his assists was like 200 or 300 points more than the assists he's generated for 2-pointers. So that's just, I mean, that alone drives home the point that like, if you don't have this guy hard charging towards the rim every single time, it's going to be tough, especially on just a single night where it's like, okay, we haven't really prepared for it. We just got a back-to-back. And it didn't seem like there was a single easy shot all night long. Like, you know, usually you can kind of drive and kick out to Brook and he'll have some space, and even he might be able to dribble back or do some sort of move to get himself free. But there was few shots that were even wide open for him. So I think it was just an outlier bad evening, like you said.
Yeah, and I mean, even just looking at the fact that, you know, we've seen some games where the Bucks shoot really bad from 3. They were 6 of 35 last night for 17.1%. That's even worse than some of these nights we've seen recently. But all you have to do then is just look at points in the paint. It was even 46, and that's how you know the Bucks have been getting huge advantages in that respect lately. I mean, they put up 80 in the paint against the Wizards the other night. And so you just look at guys like, I mean, Malcolm Brogdon, his shot chart was tough from behind the arc, obviously, just 0 for 4 from deep. But you know, inside the arc, you saw him miss a lot of bunnies, a lot of close layups like that. When those aren't falling, then you know the Bucks aren't going to win. Anything else that you had from that game, Kyle, before we destroy it from our memory?
It was just a weird game. Like I said, no one could hit a shot, and it's not like the Magic offensively were doing anything spectacular, but it seemed like the Bucks defense just completely went out the window. The majority of every time I looked, it was an open 3 or a dunk, and it wasn't anything in between. So as Bud said yesterday, just take this game, take the tape, and throw it in the trash, and light that trash on fire.
Yep, I'm cool with that. And Terrence Ross, if you want to stop being a Bucks killer, random Bucks killer, that would be great as well. All right, guys, let's talk about the huge news that obviously happened. The trade deadline is over. Pieces have shifted, and most importantly, the Bucks are getting lauded across the board by most of the national pundits for their picking up Nikola Mirotic. And so if you've been under a rock, here's sort of the full detail of what the Bucks basically gave up. So they gave up Thon Maker to Detroit, and then Detroit basically sent Stanley Johnson to New Orleans as well. And RIP to that Stanley Johnson, breaking down his game article I put up briefly on Brewhoo.
that bad boy right on fire.
Oh, yeah.
Throw it out.
Got those clicks, though. Got those clicks.
Exactly. Get the clicks.
And then the Bucks also send Jason Smith in his celebratory manner, along with 4 second-round picks. The Wizards 2021 and 2020 unprotected second-round picks, the Bucks 2020 second-round pick, and Denver's 2019 top 55 protected, which I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, came from that Roy Hibbert trade a couple years ago. And weirdly, those seems like ones that would never ever transfer. Those are basically next to nothing, but that one actually could, get sent to the New Orleans and get used if Denver continues on its run here for the rest of the season. So, Riley, let's just start with you. What was your immediate reaction when you saw this trade go down?
So, as everybody knows, I'm a gigantic Bulls hater. I mean, the worst franchise of all time, so obnoxious. And one of the most obnoxious aspects of the late aughts, early 2010s Bulls was Nikola Mirotic. I loathed his existence. I didn't like his beard. I thought when he got in that scuffle with Bobby Portis, not that I wish harm against anyone, but, I was like, really? Of course it's Nikola Mirotic that got in a fight because it's the Bulls. So that kind of first surged out of me. And then I cleared my mind of all that dislike that just kind of comes naturally with anybody involved with Chicago. And I think it's just it's impressive because when the first trade happens with Thon Maker, you're like, okay, Stanley Johnson. I mean, everybody, both your piece, Adam, and then everybody kind of talking about it was like, okay, he's maybe like specialty defensive help or something, which would be helpful in certain circumstances. But you're like, is Thon Maker, is that really the best you're going to get out of it? But to be able to quickly transition that over into a guy who essentially could step in and be an immediate starter or like fill every prototype of what we need for somebody on the wing. I mean, it's speechless, really. I didn't even think he was really on the radar. And I know that New Orleans, I think initially was asking for a first for him. So the fact that we were able to kind of stockpile all those seconds and convert that into him, it's impressive and good on Horst and good on the organization to make it happen.
Kyle, what about you when you first saw it come across Twitter?
Well, it was funny because when I saw the Thon trade, I was kind of the same thing. Like, that's all you can really get from him. But then again, it's not like he had much value in the first place. And to request a trade pretty much plummeted that even more. So them getting Stanley Johnson, I was like, okay, weird. I think I was talking to my wife about it, and I said, basically, they got a player that is decent but isn't playing, and they swapped him for a player that is decent that probably won't play. And that's kind of pretty much, that was like the only thing I could really think of it. But as the day went, I was kind of thinking maybe it's weird that they haven't announced the trade officially on the Bucks website. So I didn't know if that was just, because of whatever logistics or physicals, whatever, but I figured this is weird. But then the fact that they were able to flip it for Mirotic was a big win for the Bucks, especially after the Sixers had made their supposed home run swing for Tobias Harris. And yeah, Mirotic is someone that, is going to be one of those first guys off the bench. He's going to be able to fire up threes, and I think he's going to be the kind of firepower off the bench that the Bucks have been needing for the past couple of weeks now. I would like to see him get more playing time than Ersan Ilyasova. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think it's just a good move for the Bucks as it helps them win now. But then in the summer, it gives them more cap flexibility.
Yeah, and I think I was going to speak to his on-court potential first. So the interesting thing with Nikola, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot more, especially in comparison to last year's playoffs, is when you're looking at this team, you keep sort of thinking about all of the positives, like the massive amount of positive players that they're able to throw out there, as opposed to just trying to fill in the negatives that basically we had last year. Like Thon Maker was a negative player for almost all of last year. And if Ersan is still going to get minutes, I mean, all that this mainly does is push his minutes down. And, maybe Bud, he seemed to be coming out a little bit of his funk lately, but I mean, this is going to push down Ersan's minutes, which basically gives you a little more margin for error, especially, which is super important in the playoffs. And then, I mean, you look at a night like last night where literally everyone is shooting horrifically from three. This is just another guy who you can throw out there that if everyone is having an off night, I mean, this is the kind of guy who, if he just has one good night, he can swing a playoff game. That could swing a playoff series if you have him being able to make shots while everyone else is missing. And, it should have been a tip off, right away, that it was just, when you look at the gamut of moves that Horst has made this year, they've all clearly fallen into this fit category. And Stanley Johnson was just so outside of any of that realm of possibility. And, I was interested in him as a potential wing defensive stopper, because I'm not sure if the Bucks have that, but his liabilities on offense just didn't really fit any of the philosophies that Bud or Horst has had in his moves this year. And so getting a guy who's just able to fill in, can fill up the stat sheet, has lots of playoff experience. I think that's really, really important for this team, especially if they're moving into the latter rounds of the playoffs and they need a guy like that.
Yeah, and it's not only that, but extra kudos to Horst because he made this move and he did so without sacrificing any of the ability to have more cap space, because I think Mirotic's contract isn't expiring. So you have that kind of going on as well. You have the on-court factor where, this guy could essentially step in and be Ersan, like if Ersan was still prime Ersan, just like he can rebound and he can shoot threes and he's helpful. Like that's exactly what you need off of the guy, off of, just bench help. And add that on top of the fact that you retain, I think, early bird rights, I'm pretty sure. So you'd be able to re-sign Mirotic, even if you're over the cap. And if you don't want to keep him around, then you get an extra, boost to your cap space. So I think just all around, top to bottom, it's an awesome trade. And then we'll have to see about the second round picks. I mean, I'm not going to lament it. You can acquire second round picks. We see it all the time. They get shifted around. So we'll see what goes on with that. But overall, I'd say it was a home run, top to bottom.
Yeah, and I mean, you've been banging the drum all year, Kyle, for the potential of this team. So I don't need to tell you this, but I mean, the longer this year went on, the more I was just like, you just need to go all in. The East is just too open this year, and if you make the finals, there's just too good of an opportunity to do that. And I mean, you look at the Bucks cupboard of assets, it's relatively bare. Like we don't have our next 3 second round picks. We don't have a second round pick till like 2022. And you're right, you can buy one and we'll see if we could potentially get one. But we also have those 2 first round picks were out. So I mean, to be able to do this and still bring in a guy that is going to make such a huge impact on this team and is going to be able to play in the playoffs and can play up or play down. Defensively might have a little more trouble in that respect, but offensively, he just adds to the versatility. And Kyle, like I said, you've been the one who's been saying this is a team with a lot more potential, and so this had to just sort of stoke that fire that you have, that this is the year to just go for it.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because after that trade, I realistically, and I tweeted it, but I was like, the Bucks can end the season with the MVP in Giannis, the Coach of the Year in Bud, a potential Executive of the Year in Horst, the NBA Finals, and then a lot of people were quick to remind me of Defensive Player of the Year, and all that seems realistic. I mean, I can't think of any reason why it wouldn't happen. I mean, if the media is smart enough, they would give Giannis the MVP and not Harden, but that's a different discussion. But I think the Mirotic trade kind of signified that this team is going to be dangerous because you can't not, if you play both Mirotic and Lopez with Giannis, just go a super jumbo lineup, that's going to be impossible to guard. And good luck with that, because you can pick your poison of letting Mirotic and Lopez fire up threes, and both of them can hit 7 or 8 in a game with no problem, or you can let Giannis just drive to the hoop and dunk it all over you. And it's going to cause a lot of headaches for the other teams in the Eastern Conference. And I think the biggest thing with this trade was this wasn't a move to say, yeah, we're going to try and win the Eastern Conference. This was a move that said we're going to match the firepower of Golden State. This is solely so that we can face Golden State in a 7-game series and match the offensive firepower that they have to the best of our ability.
Oh, okay. So my next question was going to be if you guys think this changes Milwaukee's ceiling. So it's sort of what you're intimating, Kyle. Riley, do you think this changes Milwaukee's ceiling in any sort of significant way?
I definitely think it increases the playoff ceiling, if only because, and Kyle made the point already, but the fact that the one main concern that you could say with like the starting unit is like, okay, Brook is really, really high right now. He's having an awesome season, but what if another team, whatever the matchup happens to be, is able to kind of play him off the floor defensively? And by bringing Mirotic in, you kind of eliminate that problem, because previously, like, okay, can we toss Ersan out there? Or maybe it would have been Thon before Thon got traded, but now you kind of have a guy that
DJ,
and DJ too, of course.
Come on,
I'm sorry. Okay, my whole point is moot at this. Everything is moot at this point. No, I just say having him on there gives you another option in case for whatever reason the DJ magical train ride comes to a crashing halt. Who knows? But I think, like you guys are saying, just it gives you more flexibility and gives you more options where you're not kind of digging towards the end of the bench to be like, okay, can Ersan give us 15 good minutes tonight? Let's spin the wheel and find out. So I think that's, I would agree that increases the ceiling right now. And we'll see, given the flexibility, what that means for the long term as well.
And we've seen But this is what I'm really fascinated to see if Bud continues to do this in the playoffs. But we've seen him at the end of quarters specifically let Brogdon sort of run bench units with like Chris and Bledsoe off the court. I mean, I don't really know if that's going to continue in the playoffs, considering we can up their minutes finally then. But if he tries to trot those out, I mean, we've seen like 2-minute stretches in past playoffs where the teams just get wrecked. Like when Tyler Zeller got out there, Milwaukee got destroyed. And so if Mirotic just offers even a guy who can just fill in there and just make like 1-3 or finish inside just one time and try and prevent that from being an absolute bloodletting, I mean, that can make all the kind of difference when the margin for error in the playoffs is so small.
Well, and it's going to be interesting because, I mean, with the bench that the Bucks can trot on in the playoffs, you're looking at Tony Snell, who I would say is a starting caliber player. You got Mirotic, who is a starting caliber player. And that's something that Milwaukee didn't have last year. Like last year, their bench was Jason Terry, Jabari Parker, Shabazz Muhammad, Tyler Zeller. Like now it's DJ Wilson, Sterling Brown, George Hill, Mirotic, Tony Snell. And that's a fantastic bench to have. And it's going to be better just to going into the playoffs where you can ride those bench units or even just stagger, have Giannis sit for a little bit and you can throw in Mirotic, have Chris sit for a little bit and you can have Tony Snell and Sterling Brown. So in terms of the depth of this team, I think that's going to be the biggest improvement, not just the starters, but the fact that you can go 9-10 deep.
Yeah, and I think I'd be remiss if we didn't also talk about this in the full context of the entire Eastern Conference. So obviously this Philadelphia 76ers made a splash as well. They traded and got Tobias Harris from the Lakers, Mike Scott, and Boban Marjanovic as well. They also traded Fultz, of course, and got Jonathan Simmons from the Orlando Magic. They're giving up a guard in Landry Shamet, a couple of first-rounders, a couple of second-rounders, Wilson Chandler and Mike Muscala. I took an immense amount of pleasure from walking out and thinking, they probably overpaid for Tobias Harris. And granted, they've looked good with him, but hearing my roommate stomp down the stairs and just start berating me for minutes about why did they do this? I'm so upset. This is making me so mad. That brought me a lot of joy. I don't know about you guys, but hopefully that brought you some joy too, to know that there were some Philly people who hated that trade.
Hey man, you got to watch out because Elton Brand came in and he changed the game. I am so tired of it. Oh my God. I'm tired of talking about the Sixers. It's ridiculous. I mean, I'm going to take a deep breath. It's them and the Timberwolves were like the other two teams last year, 2 years ago, that everybody's like, oh, you got to watch out for the Sixers and Timberwolves. They're probably the most promising young teams in the league. And what did the Timberwolves do? They self-imploded, and they're not a total firing, like fiery wreck, but close to. They could be any minute now. And then with the Sixers, it's like, all right, so we go through the process, right? And they become a league-wide pariah, and all their fans rally around the fact that the team sucks, and et cetera, et cetera. And now you have Brand come in because of the whole situation that happened earlier, and he's gotten good pieces, you could say, but who knows about the chemistry? Mount Jimmy is ready to erupt any second now. God bless him. Let's hope it happens sooner rather than later. And then Brand kind of ends up sending off a lot of the treasure chest that Hinkie put together over the years of losing and losing and losing. And now I'm supposed to, wake up the other day and pretend like all of a sudden the Sixers are finals to be team. I don't think so. So I'm tired of talking about the Sixers, and hopefully they're, the run with Harris is cut short. I'm losing words right now because I'm so apoplectic talking about it.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, as a glimpse into the Philly fans' mind, now, what is it, 4 days later or whatever, he came in after the Lakers win today and said, so how much can we offer Tobias? I'd like to, know how much we could offer him and make sure we max him out. My roommate said that. So opinions change quickly around here. With the Raptors, though, of course, they get Marc Gasol, give up Delon Wright, Jonas Valanciunas, and CJ Miles. I'm not exactly sure about the Marc Gasol fit for them. This has been said on plenty of other podcasts, but I was far more scared of them when they go small. And Marc Gasol can, of course, be a good matchup for Brook Lopez and everything inside. But I mean, they were getting sort of the same viability with Serge Ibaka hitting most of it mid-rangers, and maybe his 3-point shot will come back in the playoffs, and he offers more athleticism in terms of blocking Giannis at the rim along with Pascal Siakam. So I'm a little more mixed on that trade. But Kyle, I guess looking at sort of this is basically what it's going to be now, besides maybe a few buyout guys switching hands, but of course Wesley Matthews went to Indiana, and Wayne Ellington went to Detroit. Which was weird, baffling to me. But, which of these Eastern Conference teams scares you the most, if any, in terms of matchups for Milwaukee in the playoffs?
I guess in terms of scares me the most, it would be Toronto. I think Toronto has the talent to beat Milwaukee in a 7-game series. I'm not sold on Philly. Philly's 5-man lineup of Simmons, Redick, Butler, Harris, and Embiid is going to be really good, and I'll acknowledge that. But they still can't really shoot. They have no bench. I mean, their bench guys are TJ McConnell, who's just a slightly better American version of Delly. And
are you dismissing Wilson Chandler right now, sir? How dare you forget Wilson Chandler? Is he still on the
I'm
team?
sorry. Chandler Wilson was sent to LA.
Oh, okay. Well, it doesn't matter. The spot that was formerly held by.
Riley's so mad right now. It's literally destroying brain cells. He's just so upset about
Chandler
this.
Slowly getting dumber as we go along. I'm getting dumber as the podcast goes on.
But yeah, Boston is just, you want to talk about ticking time bombs. Boston, I think, is a bigger ticking time bomb than Jimmy Butler is. At least Jimmy Butler, when he goes off, it's just because he wants to win. With Boston, it's just a matter of no one seems to want to take the blame, and no one knows how to, it's just an imploding mess that shouldn't have happened because they're underachieving. And I, for one, think that's better than Philly imploding. So I'm not afraid of Boston. The only time Boston would scare me is if Al Horford is able to pick and pop the Bucks to death. And even now with Mirotic, it's you can probably just throw Giannis out there and it can help limit the effectiveness of Horford. But yeah, I guess I would go Toronto just because Van Vliet seems to he's going to be the new Bucks killer. Siakam is a goddamn problem, and I will acknowledge that. Kawhi is still Kawhi. Serge Ibaka is always due to seem to hit 5 or 6 threes. So I would say Toronto's the closest thing, but I'm not really scared of the Raptors.
Are you scared of anyone, Riley?
No, not at all. I think in all honesty, if I'm not being a super angry homer, then I would say pretty much all of them offer interesting matchups. I think probably the first rounds of the playoffs won't be all that interesting, but once we get into the second round and beyond, it's going to be fascinating to see how the top 4 shake out. And Indiana's kind of dropped off because of the Oladipo injury, obviously, but they're also kind of interesting. So there's no slouches there. Then once you kind of get further down beyond that, it's not nearly that much to talk about. But I think the top 4, it could go any sort of way. Each team has a couple of players that could get really hot over the course of a series, and that could just end it for the other team. And yes, we have the best player in the conference in Giannis. But if Eric or Chris has a really off series again, and the other team is able to game plan and kind of do how Boston did last year or tried to do, where it's just okay, we're going to stonewall Giannis and see if anybody else can beat us. If they're kind of able to do that and it doesn't work out Milwaukee's way, in theory, there's more margin for error given the construction of the roster and the way the system is built. But it's not an unrealistic see things don't go our way and we lose against one of the top teams. So.
Yeah,
but I think I'm not really scared of them.
I think that's certainly the case. And I mean, we definitely certainly made light of the Orlando loss. That stuff happens, but it's going to be a very, very tight race down to the end. And losing a game like that does hurt when you think about the fact that Milwaukee could be in play to try to get home court advantage even in the NBA Finals. So all of those wins really do count up. And then especially you look at just the Eastern Conference playoffs. I mean, all of those teams, like you said, I think it really, I don't know if Milwaukee matches up better or worse with some teams. I would agree with Kyle that I think Toronto might be the most scariest or the scariest to me. But I think it weirdly might be a little bit more about the first round, which is bizarre to me. I just don't want to face Miami in the first round, which is a really weird thing to have to say.
James Johnson, the Buck killer.
The Bucks have just had so much trouble against them. So it's such a weird thing to say. But you know, obviously the second round is going to be a bloodbath. And I guess for me, instead of being scared of these teams, I've really thought just more and more this is just all about how this Bucks team executes. If they're making their shots, I just don't really know if there's a team that's going to beat them. And this is I usually prescribe mostly to stats in terms of thinking about how a team's going to win. But there was just that little throwaway line in Zach Lowe's column that talked about the trade deadline. And it was talking about how even when he talked like privately with the coaches on the team, I think he said it on his podcast too, and talked about with the players and coaches with Milwaukee, they feel like something special is happening here. There's something really important brewing. And, whatever you think of Bill Simmons, he had that take in his book of basketball, The Secret of Basketball, is basically the chemistry and getting together and that kind of stuff. And the more Kyle was talking about, and you two, Riley, were talking about these ticking time bombs in the East, the more I just start to feel like maybe like Milwaukee, even if they're going in unfit, maybe a little less star talent, but they have the best player out of anyone in the Eastern Conference, and they have this amazing chemistry that everyone's bought into. They're willing to shapeshift on the fly. No one is going to be angry about their role. Everyone's going to be there to pick each other up. I don't know. I feel like at some point in the playoffs, that might matter when the margins are going to be so close between all these top teams.
Yeah, I would say that, and it cannot be rammed home enough how important retaining the number 1 seed and having home court would be, just because we've seen in the past just how, you would have to, obviously the stats kind of go into it and show that being the home team obviously advantages you a lot in the playoffs, but just the way the crowd can end up being in Milwaukee. I remember 2 years ago in the Raptors series, game 3, and it was overwhelming, even watching on TV, how crazy the crowd was and how much of a boost that was, both throughout that series and then last year as well against Boston. So do not discount the fact that every single victory will matter, especially grabbing, and I'm not sure, can somebody remind me, would we get home court during the finals? How is that determined?
Yeah, I believe it's best record. I don't think it's
okay. Just best record overall. Okay. Well,
MLB,
yeah. So that drives the point home even more. If you can somehow make a finals run and you get home court advantage during it, that's absolutely, that's crazy to think about, but it's right there. It's a possibility.
Yeah, and like you said, Milwaukee turns up for the play. I remember I went to that 2 games in that Bulls series a couple years ago. Game 3, I remember they lost, but I was there for that game where Jared Bayless made the game-winning shot right at the end, and it was so freaking crazy in there, especially because the stadium was like 70% Bulls fans, because they figured they would just close us out. And so that was where a complete hatred of Bulls fans started. But yeah, to be able to have that satisfaction that day and have the whole like 30% of Bucks fans shouting Bucks in 6 as they went out, even though they'd have to win in 7, obviously. It was
math does not apply.
It, and especially with Milwaukee, if they're able to advance to, just to the second round, like the place would be going absolutely crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
well, I was going to say, just think of game 3 of that Toronto series and how loud it was from the beginning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, that was one of the games that I kind of wish I would have attended. Just watching on TV, it was like, I wish I was there. It was loud, and you could tell through the TV. Like the comeback during game 6, I was there for game 4, and that was pretty loud. Like, this Fiserv Forum's going to break some eardrums come playoff time.
Speaking of playoff preparation, just quick topic shift.
Mm-hmm.
I know the Bucks still have an open roster spot per the trades. Do you guys have any preference for what kind of player they should bring in? I don't know if I have no list in front of me of who the potential buyout guys or who is available, but I've heard some people talk about like, oh, we need a big C because we sent out 2 more centers and Jason Smith and Thon Maker, though who knows if they were actually going to play, or if we want more guard help, or what you guys' wish list looks like.
I would have said Wayne Ellington and Wes Matthews first, but those 2 are off the table. I guess Dwayne Dedmon wouldn't be a bad option. I'm kind of thinking like another center would help just in case something were to happen to Brook Lopez. Then you're not going in without a true center on your roster. So I guess Dwayne Dedmon would be the person I'd pick, but I'm not like gonna bang the drum for it.
Adam?
Yeah, I think. I'd be fine getting a big guy. I think it makes the most sense. Maybe even if somehow Robin Lopez somehow wanted to come up, I just think he's so crafty. And of course, we'd have just an immense amount of good content between him and Brook interacting. But I think just having a big body would be important. And I know there might get played off in the finals or whatever. But if you get to the finals and you're like going up against, DeMarcus Cousins or something, you're going to need some guy who's going to be able to fill in, because Giannis is going to take a beating with more minutes already in the playoffs. And I think you may need a guy just to go in there for like 2-3 minutes and just be able to body up someone else who might be taking you to court. Lest we forget the night Jahlil Okafor was able to dominate this Bucks team. So thank God he's not on the buyout market.
Now he just drinks us. He's going to be out there any minute. No, I would agree. I don't have really a preference. I think the guard rotation, the wing depth is pretty good now that we got Mirotic. So I would generally agree with you guys' points that maybe some sort of big guy would be helpful, but I have no preference. Just wanted to talk about it.
No, I think that's important. And when you're talking about, let's talk about this roster in general. And the next thing I was starting to think about was, you guys talked earlier about the masterful nature of this move for Horst in terms of retaining flexibility for next year. Of course, you get off Thon Maker's $3.6 million. Every little bit helps when you have so many players that you need to retain and try and avoid the luxury tax still. So one of my thoughts coming into this year that I liked the Budenholzer hiring for, of course, was the fact that he's proven he's gonna, he has an ability to. We need to prove to Giannis that this team is able to come together and go far and able to, succeed now as opposed to looking far towards into the future. But the one thing I thought was kind of a difficult mishmash of what we're thinking of in terms of expectations for the team, but then also the front office trying to determine which of these players are they supposed to keep. So I was thinking about this postseason, and, Zach Lowe mentioned this too, is that one of those 4 teams is going to lose, and it's going to have really strong ripple effects. How much do you guys think like the front office is going to be looking at this postseason as a proving ground for all of these players? Obviously, if they go really far, all of us are going to be like, yeah, oh yeah, bring them back. But if worst case scenario, they somehow lose, I think it's going to be an even more fascinating offseason in a lot of ways to try and figure out, okay, do we take this 82 game sample that we had here of this team absolutely destroying everyone at a rate that was relatively historic, or do we take this, 8 to 12 game sample and see which guys succeeded, which guys didn't, and use that to sort of determine how we're trying to focus ourselves for the future?
It kind of feels very much, and the other day I went on and talked about Bucks Twitter turning to Raptors Twitter, but I would say it's kind of comparative to the Raptors of the past couple of years, where it's like they were a pretty good regular season team and they had all the metrics kind of in their favor. Like, okay, they're solid. Like, we'll just kind of see how it works out in the playoffs. And, year after year, they kind of fell short with their key guys in the playoffs. So I would kind of look at it, assuming they're going to be looking at it that way, where, especially with so many guys that are going to kind of be up for, bringing back or new contracts, I suppose they will probably more so look at what does this look like in the playoffs, given that kind of situation. And it, like you said, Adam, kind of depends. Are they going kind of deeper into the playoffs? Did they have a really good first round, but then just things didn't work out the second round for whatever reason? But I'm going to go ahead and assume, given all the flexibility they're giving themselves, they'll be looking at the playoffs primarily as saying, okay, we know Bud can develop a system and kind of put players in, kind of swap, replace, whatever the matter happens to be, and keep it going. But what does it look like in the postseason? Who really contributes, and what's that value look like in a dollar and year amount?
Yeah. What about you, Kyle? How do you think those priorities might be balanced?
I think it depends on the player, to be honest, because if Brook Lopez has a struggling playoff series, I don't think that's going to deter the organization's feeling of him, just because if you say he shoots 2 for 10 consistently in games, so it's like he was still shooting it, he was still a threat. It's just unfortunate that it didn't it didn't fall as just a cold stretch, so that's whatever. But a guy like Eric Bledsoe, where if he has a bad postseason, then it's like this is the second straight postseason that he's failed to show up. And then it's like, you can see Kemba's out there. You can possibly, there's other point guards that you can possibly get to fill in. And that's where I think, a guy like Bledsoe, he's going to be the one that's going to be graded more harshly based off his postseason, just because he had such a bad one against Boston, while someone like Brook, where it's like, if he doesn't hit his shots, he was still a threat. And then with Middleton and Brogdon, I think those two, I don't think it'll be based off of the postseason, just because with Brogdon, it's like, well, you're probably a 4th, 5th option. It's just a matter of how much is someone going to want to pay you compared to do we want to bring you back? And with Middleton, that's just going to be a headache, and I don't even want to cross that bridge. So I think it varies player by player.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead, Riley.
Well, I was going to say, I think it's doubly difficult for us to kind of predict from the outside, but probably also for the people within the team themselves to figure out how to prioritize, certain guys over others, just because the Bucks, just like so many other teams, are going to have cap space. And unlike years past where it might have been more incentive to try and retain the guys on hand, just because Milwaukee's not really a destination. That's kind of, the old hat, and who knows whether or not that'll hold in this upcoming offseason now that we have this track record of, okay, look, we have the MVP, we're a super dominant regular season team, and all we're looking for is we envision you free agent, whoever you happen to be fitting in here. That, or it could work out the other way where if the Bucks kind of stand pat and the market for the guys on our team who are going to be free agents kind of dries up, then maybe they're able to kind of swoop in. But I think it's just really hard to tell right now how the market is going to work out. And like I said, I think it's still going to be postseason success, but even that, maybe they don't prefer to bring back Chris, but then his market dries up and like, okay, well, fine, we'll bring you back, or whatever the case is.
Yeah, I think it's going to be such a fascinating chess match. And I thought this way more before the season when they had significantly less flexibility, and it felt like they had to make a really strong determination in terms of their priorities of who they were going to put over one another. Now that they have a bit more flexibility, it's a little more open for them. And of course, I think it's interesting that the Mirotic seems to provide like some front court insurance. Maybe if between him and Brook, I think, if you retained one of those guys, that's pretty good. I think it's fascinating. I think Eric Bledsoe is, obviously, we all know he's going to be under an intense microscope this postseason after his struggles last year. But I mean, Chris Middleton, his first couple postseasons, he had a tough time before breaking out in that Boston series. And you hope Bledsoe is able to do the same this year. But I think about, you're not going to be able to get a guy. None of the people underneath these Bucks players, whether it's Eric Bledsoe or Chris Middleton, are going to be able to replace their production or their ability. But I think a lot about like the potential fallout like beneath these guys. And I don't know how much Eric Bledsoe insurance there's going to be. Maybe the point guard isn't as important in today's NBA. But I do feel like, and Eric Name mentioned this on Locked On Bucks about how Eric Bledsoe seems to set the defensive tone for this team. And I mean, in that Wizards game, he was like, yeah, it's time to go. And even in some of these other games here, he's like, when he hits the fourth quarter, I like seeing him be like, all right, it's time to just double down and just take this game over, destroy the opposing team's point guard and get this team out on the run. And let's start to just turn the screws on this other team. And I think Chris Middleton is probably capable of doing that, maybe from the offensive end, but I don't feel like he has as much of like a, sort of like tying into the this is our time to make a run, like tying into the actual like fabric of this team in terms of like ramping up intensity and that kind of stuff.
Well, I think that's because the offense isn't not like years past under Kidd, where it was like, okay, it's kind of like equally dictated by Giannis and Chris. Mm-hmm. So I think that's definitely got a large part to do with it. And maybe Chris still has it in him in a playoff series to kind of take over and get really hot one night. But just the way the offense is structured now, that's really not feasible. He's not getting enough shots. He doesn't get enough minutes. And in theory, though, it sounds like Bud is kind of loosened up on it, but in theory, he should be looking for very specific shots. And the only guy who's really allowed a lot of creativity for the most part seems to be Giannis.
True. Yeah. And I think it's going to be like the offense is going to be a little bit different because, after games 1 and 2, teams will probably make some kind of adjustment, whether it's, okay, well, Brook Lopez is hitting 5 threes. we need a guy solely just to stay on him. We'll just cram the paint, and, if Bledsoe and Brogdon and Middleton hit their threes, so be it. But we're not letting Brook Lopez beat us. Or it could be, okay, we'll just let Bledsoe keep the ball out of Giannis's hand as much as possible. Let Bledsoe do whatever he wants, or let Brogdon do whatever he wants. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how the offense adjusts. And I think the main constant is going to be Giannis is going to dominate. Brook Lopez is going to fire from 30 feet out. And Chris is going to be the big question mark where it's like, I don't know if he's going to want to like hunt out those threes or if he's going to just kind of go Kidd era and just make his own shot and be a secondary playmaker. So I think that's going to be the interesting part is what teams do on their adjustments after, the first game or two of a series.
Well, yeah, Kyle, the way that you bring that up, I mean, that's the dream scenario for Chris, right? Is like, the Bucks do well the first 2 games, the other team adjusts, and all of a sudden Bud's have handily crafted system doesn't work out nearly as much. And now maybe he's able to kind of defer to Chris to say, hey, we need a little bit more creativity. We need some more free flowing offense. We can kind of move away from the rigid system, and Chris can kind of step in. So I think that would be a perfect circumstance for him, and probably why he has so much value to the team as well, even though maybe he doesn't fit as perfectly into the system. But, once game time comes and it becomes a little bit more chaotic or the flow is a little bit different, then his value kind of shoots up as well.
Yeah, I think those are both excellent points. And it just speaks to the fact that this team has significantly more options this year heading into the postseason, who might be able to get hot or pull this team out in a game that was closer. They're maybe not having, some of the star players aren't having as big of a night. So we'll have to definitely keep an eye on that as we get closer to the postseason. Let's touch on a few other things before we head out of there. Of course, the All-Star weekend is coming up. Chris Middleton is in the 3-point contest. RIP to all of our hopes and dreams that Brooke Lopez would make it. In terms of other Bucks-related representatives, Mark Lasry and Ray Allen are playing in the celebrity game. And Chris and Giannis are in the actual All-Star game, of course, at 7 p.m. on Sunday. Giannis did his teammate a solid and drafted him first among all of the reserves. So, Kyle, which of those are you most looking forward to out of all of the All-Star stuff?
Definitely the celebrity game, just because
okay,
the 3-point shootout's kind of boring. If I don't know, I kind of got it was cool when I was younger, but now it's kind of okay, it's just a bunch of dudes taking a bunch of threes. I watch that 80 times a year now, so it's kind of worn off on me. And the dunk contest, I feel like since that 2016 battle between Zach LaVine and Aaron Gordon, it hasn't been as good. But the Celebrity All-Star Game is always just funny because it's you just see people, it's they've never played basketball or they have no athletic ability, it seems and it's kind of funny seeing that. But looking at the team that Mark Lasry's on with him and Ray Allen and Quavo, that team is kind of stacked. And it's always just interesting to see how that game always turns out, just because, I said, you see a bunch of people that you don't know if they're actually good, and you see former players are they washed or do they still have it? So for me, it's going to be a celebrity game.
I didn't know Little Bow Wow had such a good handle. Every single celebrity game.
I'm sad he's not in it. Yeah, but how long have you? I'm sad. This is a sad state of affairs that I haven't been able to look at the full rosters of celebrity games yet because I love watching it. My favorite celeb ever to participate in this is Chris Tucker, star of the Rush Hour series. I don't know if you guys ever remember the games he was in. He has by far the worst shot I've ever seen a human have. He hoists it in front of his face and then shoots it at such an insane arc that I think there's absolutely no way it could go in. So I'll have to post some highlight videos of Chris Tucker in the celebrity game. I'll see if they're available online. But
is Kevin Hart on the team again? Because
no, I think he's been
yeah,
he's retired for good.
Okay, it's probably for the best.
Yeah, that was, oh my god! When he took the MVP from Arnie Duncan, former Secretary of Education, that was one of the biggest travesties I've seen, and it might rank above if Harden gets the MVP over Giannis this year.
Dang, that one got you right. That struck you in the heart, didn't it?
Yeah, I've seen way too many of these, and I like you said, Kyle. I'm really curious to see how Bad Bunny integrates in with Ronnie 2K on this Ray Allen team. I think it's just going to be a fascinating mix of personalities.
Someone that I think might actually be pretty good, and I'll be surprised. It's going to be Hassan Minaj. He's the guy he was the one that did the correspondent dinner a few years ago, and he has a show on Netflix, Patriot Act. He's a comedian. He's someone that he looks like someone that probably is going to be really, really good or really, really bad. There's no in between. So that's going to be my okay, that's the one I want to see how he turns out.
The guy I think that will be worst, I'm just going to go out on a limb here. I feel like Chris Daughtry is going to be the worst.
Hey, come on now. Now, I don't feel strongly about Daughtry, but one of Daughtry's favorite bands is also one of my favorite bands, so I give respect to Chris Daughtry for that. I don't want to get into it farther beyond that, but don't talk crap about Chris Daughtry.
All right.
If Luke Coulter doesn't barrel people over, I'm going to be very disappointed. That dude is huge. He should be in the post just throwing elbows 90s style.
Wow. Okay. Well, I feel like that was better analysis. I'm sorry. I might have to edit that back to the beginning so that people will stay in. That's you got to inverted pyramid this stuff. Okay. Well, are you guys excited? Are you guys excited at all?
Oh, Kyle, go.
I was gonna say, you know what I miss? The Shooting Stars competition. That was my favorite growing up because it was one of the coolest things where you had like the legend and then the WNBA star and then I think it was like a current player or something.
Yeah. Can I admit something?
Yes.
I don't watch any of the All-Star Weekend events. I don't watch a single second of any of it. Is that sacrilegious or
no,
the silence is happening right now? But
I didn't watch anything last year. I think I watched a little bit of the All-Star game, like Giannis's first All-Star game. I watched a little bit of that, but otherwise, I'm in the same boat. And I don't have cable, so it's like harder for me to find a stream for it.
It's just really ugly, like half-assed basketball. And I think the last event that I saw was like a couple years ago when Tim Hardaway Jr. and I can't remember his name, down in Miami now, played in Cleveland, guy who weighs a lot. It'll come to me. They got in like a 3-point shooting contest. Yeah, Dion. Sorry, Dion. Shout out Dion. When they got in that like back and forth 3-point contest in the middle of the sophomore freshman game or whatever. That was probably the last thing I saw, but it's just awful basketball and everything's super contrived and corny in my opinion. But if you like watching the All-Star events, more power to you.
Oh, I forgot about the rookie sophomore game. Of course, our beloved Dante DiVincenzo won't be playing with as he recovers from bursitis. And of course, Dante's Inferno is going to be taking a brief absence here.
You sound so sad. You sound so sad.
I am sad.
Yeah, we're putting that one on the injury list for now, waiting till Dante comes back.
Okay.
Get back soon and healthy. Yeah, I mean, I haven't watched these things that much lately. I was curious if there's a 3-point contest curse. Maybe it'll work in reverse for Chris, so he'll start to, shoot even better from 3. That'd be promising for him. But other than that, I'm not really excited for many of the games. I like that Giannis is in it and he's a captain and everything, and it's cool that he picked Chris. But I'm not super stoked for the actual game itself either.
Yeah, if you can get like one more giveable moment, like when he dunked over Curry a couple of years ago, and DeAndre did an awesome job of giving us an alternate angle. Shout out DeAndre Jordan for that. If we can get one more out of that, then All-Star Weekend is all worth it.
All right. Well, I guess Kyle and I will be just tweeting up a storm during that celebrity game, just trying to break down some of the stuff that's going on there. But other than that, we'll get to move on to what's going to be happening between now and probably when we next podcast. Bucks are playing 4 games here, but between now and when we hope the next coming at you across the airwaves. So Monday, February 11th at Chicago. Of course, that's today when you're listening to this. And then Wednesday, February 13th at Indianapolis. That one's at 6 p.m. Central. And then after the break, they open up Thursday home against Boston. That should be a really intriguing matchup. That one's at 7 o'clock. And then Saturday home for the Minnesota Timberwolves as well at 7:30 p.m. So Kyle, how do you have the Bucks going across these next four games?
Well, considering I nailed it last week, I'm going to go 3-1. I don't know if it's going to be the Indiana game or the Boston game. Well, I feel like one of those two is where the Bucks will kind of trip up. I don't know. I can definitely see Boston just like having a rah-rah. We're going to show that we're fine and have like one great game and beat the Bucks, and then next day they're going to lose and everything's up in flames. So I think I'll go 3-1. I feel good about the Chicago game because the Bucks just lost, and they're going to drop. They're going to win by like 30 against the Bulls. It's going to be a bloodbath. And I'm going to the Minnesota game, so they can't lose that one.
Is that a command, or is that what?
Command, prediction, statement, whatever you want. Not a threat.
Okay, good.
However you want to phrase it.
All right. Well, sounds good. Riley, what do you have them? What are you commanding them to go?
4-0. I hope.
Yeah, me too. I'm going 4-0 as well. It's weird that you and I are more optimistic than Kyle.
Yikes.
It's very rare.
Yeah, I mean, they'll probably be super annoying and lose to the Bulls tonight. So expect that. If there's going to be a loss, it's going to be super annoying and insufferable against the worst team to ever exist.
Well, that's a great way to end it. So thank you guys
that high note.
for listening to the Brew Hoop podcast. Of course, stay tuned to brewhoop.com for all of our all-star content we might have over this week, as well as game coverage and breakdowns from everyone over at the site. And as a little tease for everyone, we might have some changes coming to the Brew Hoop podcast feed. No need to worry. These are only going to be excellent changes. We're going to have a post on brewhoop.com coming up, just talking a little bit about those changes. We're interested to hear your feedback on it. But just, the most important thing is to keep your subscription. Maybe leave a review if you're interested. That would be fantastic. Tell all of your friends to subscribe. No matter how many you may have, let them all know that the Brew Hoop podcast feed is the place where you're going to get all of this sweet Bucks content, like breakdowns of the celebrity game. So, of course, for Kyle Carr and Riley Feldman, I'm Adam Paris. Thank you again so much for listening. Let's go Team Giannis. See you next time.